What is up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos. This time for Wednesday, November 10th. We were off last night, tonight as I'm recording this, but last night, which was November 9th, because there was only a 3-game slate. We are back with a significantly larger, I want to say 13-game slate, but I'm not actually. Yes, it is 13 games. Just a crazy amount of games for any NBA slate, realistically. They've gone back to weird this week where they had 3 games on Tuesday. I think they have 3 tomorrow on Thursday. I believe Ben will be putting out a podcast for that anyway. But that gives us a massive 13-game slate. Last time we were here, I asked everyone to give me a prediction for how many points Frank Kaminsky will score. For, I believe, the second day in a row, after just well over a week of no one hitting it, we did have someone hit it. It is Green Monster 17. Nice, great call on 10 points. I also blame you for Frank Kaminsky struggling so bad in that game. Maybe if you projected 20 to 25 points, he would have done significantly better. This video will be slightly different. I do want to quick go over a little bit in terms of how kind of you play out your season. This has to do with sports betting, DFS, basically anything, just because I hit one of these weird roads specifically with sports betting in the last basically, 2, maybe 3 days. College basketball started, so I've been betting college basketball. It was the first day last night, which is when I'm recording this now, and I've had a couple bad nights of NBA, nothing too crazy, but just not great. And it's so smart to stick to bankroll management because there's variance in these sports, and you can do literally everything correctly. You can pick everything exactly how it should happen, and you can still lose. You can go on losing streaks, as is basically the case with anything in life. You will win, you will lose. A lot of the times those streaks will seemingly come together where you either have a very good time for quite a while, or you have a very bad time for quite a while. That's no different in DFS, no different in sports betting. It's kind of the same all around, just where these weird things will happen. Like the last time that I bet NBA, I bet Jordan Poole over on points. He was absolutely dominant for 3 consecutive games. Maybe it was 3 out of 4. Whatever it was, the Warriors scored like 127 or something, and Poole didn't hit 19, which is what he needed. He shot like 6 of 16 or something, which just well below how he's been playing. In the same night, Frank Kaminsky, obviously, I bet over, I think, 19 and a half points, rebounds, and assists, whatever it was. Obviously, he struggled with foul trouble, no DeAndre Ayton, and he only played 21 minutes. He hit the under. Basically, both of those plays I would make again, which leads me to believe that they were the right plays. There are some bets that you would make, and then after the bet concludes, you're like, that was really dumb. I shouldn't have bet that. Those were not 2 of them. Still lost both of them, and it just shows kind of the variance in this, where you should really be sticking to strict bankroll management that lets you slide through any of these streaks. The good ones, you're going to win. You're going to keep making money. The bad ones, you're going to kind of limit how much you lose on that, which is what's going to help you profit over the long run. But I guess enough about that. The intro that we didn't do. If you enjoy this video, go ahead, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I guess tonight, let's go with, we have, 13 games, so a lot of different players that we can choose. Let's go with Lamello Ball and a matchup against Ja Morant. How many points will Lamello Ball score? And you can add in also how many points Ja Morant will score. And if you hit both of them on the head, maybe I'll be able to give out a free week of our NBA core plays package. Not promising anything, but I think that would be extremely impressive if you can, in the comments, guess how many points Lamello Ball will score and how many points Ja Morant will score. Not combined between the two, specifically Lamello Ball point total, Ja Morant point total. If you get both of them right, I will see if I can get you a free week of our NBA core plays package. Again, no promises. I need to talk to the higher ups. It's not my decision. I would definitely give it because that's a ridiculous feat that you just did. But regardless, comment those totals below. Also, again, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. You can find all of our content at dfskarma.com. The core plays that I was talking about, you can purchase them at dfskarma.com/pricing. Chat DFS if you want to get into our free Discord. Also, when you buy the core plays package, you get into our premium Discord. So all of that will be available to you at dfskarma.com. You can find it all there, or you can just look in the description below. We have links to all of that, along with all of our socials, including my Twitter, which you can see right here, Bales S. Justin. Throw me a follow if you don't already. But I guess we can get down to the injury news of the slate. I apologize for how ridiculously long this is about to be. It is 13 games, and it's injury news in the NBA. It isn't something that we can just skip over. In the MLB, like if a guy's not starting, it's not a big deal. In the NBA, it essentially changes everything. So I will try not to discuss players that have been out and will be out for quite some time yet. So I'll just go with the ones that are kind of going to affect tonight. First, Etuan Moore is listed as out. Isaac Okoro is questionable. Kevin Love is out. Then obviously Lauri Markkanen is still ineligible to return at the moment. Kevin Porter Jr. is questionable. Daniel House and Eric Gordon are off of the injury report at this point, so they should both be playing. Pascal Siakam is in. Let's see, as we move down, Chris Middleton is going to miss once again. Brook Lopez is finally questionable. Mitchell Robinson and Nerlens Noel are both questionable for this game. Herb Jones and Brandon Ingram are both questionable as well. They've been missing quite a few games recently. Dylan Brooks is finally up to questionable, but no lock to return yet tonight. It seems as if he's close, though. Tyrese Halliburton questionable with a lower back injury. Jakob Poeltl continues to be out. Malcolm Brogdon questionable. You have Michael Porter Jr., and this is actually a really interesting injury. Hopefully it's nothing too much. It just says lower back soreness, but obviously Michael Porter was a top 3 pick probably, and then he had back problems in college that led to him falling to Denver in the draft. So hopefully that's not really part of this, but there's a lot of people speculating that he could miss quite some time. None of that has been announced at the moment. He's just out for tonight. Nikola Jokic has been suspended. He will not play in this game. And prior to going over everything, we are going to talk about Denver, just because that's a very clean spot that we need to figure out. DeAndre Ayton has already been ruled out. Landry Shamet is doubtful. Bam Adebayo, PJ Tucker, both questionable. Tyler Hero also questionable. While Markieff Morris, the other side of the Nikola Jokic fight, has already been ruled out for tonight. And then you have Rajon Rondo and Austin Reeves are both questionable for LA. LeBron will be out again. Anthony Davis is up at probable. So before we go position by position, I think the very clear spot tonight that you need to figure out what's happening is going to be Denver. I'm not sure we're going to really know what's going on prior to them essentially announcing their starting lineup. I don't know what they're planning on doing at center. If I had to guess, it seems like they're going to play small ball. JaMychal Green has played center some this season. The big issue is you can't play 45 minutes of him. Aaron Gordon, they could put at center. Jeff Green, they could put at center as well. The other option that they have are 2 former first-round picks. One is Bol Bol, and the other is Zeke Nanji. Both are 3,000. If either one of them draws the start, they're going to make great plays. It's possible. I haven't figured it out at this point yet, so another reason to get into our free Discord, because we will be discussing it throughout the day, that even if they don't start, they could be forced into minutes. Will Barton has kind of taken over a little bit more of the offense recently. 45 plus in 2 of his last 3. He scored over 35 in the 3rd one. And more or less, he's just locked into basically 35 plus minutes. That's not going to get any lighter now. So I do think that Will Barton is a very good option. Monte Morris should see plenty of time. He's coming off of a big game. Should get 30 plus minutes. He's only 44. You have other guys like Campazzo, you have Bones Highland, PJ Dozier, all of them will at least see some type of role in this game. So I would anticipate that the guys that are definitely locked into big minutes will be Monty Morris, Will Barton, Jeff Green, and I want to say, well, Aaron Gordon as well. And then I want to say JaMychal Green, but I don't necessarily know if he's going to play more than roughly 25. So that's kind of we're kind of at a weird spot where there's very clear-cut guys that are going to get the 30-plus minutes, and then there's a few guys that kind of rotationally will be in and out. I think that PJ Dozier is probably set for 20 to 25, and he's performed well on a per-minute basis essentially throughout his career. Struggled a bit this season, but he's played 20-plus minutes in each of his last two, and in both of those he scored 18.5 and 22.5. Prior to that, he's played relatively well when given at least 20 minutes, so I do think that he's in play there as well. But we can move to position by position at this point. We'll just go through each of the 5 positions. I'll kind of break them down into pricing tier. I'm not going to mention everyone that is viable tonight, everyone that I even like tonight. There's only so many guys that I can say on this stream. We're already, over 10 minutes in. And there's only so many players that I can kind of point out at this point. So if you have any questions about anyone, I know we do this daily, but drop them in the comments along with your prediction for Lamello Ball and Ja Morant. Their point totals, not fantasy points, just true point totals. And I will give you my honest opinion on any player that you ask about. But starting at point guard, I feel like I want to sit around one of the two guys that we're guessing, because they're both are right around 10K. We're finally at the point in the season where a lot of the top guys are kind of not necessarily overpriced, but they aren't, when we had Damian Lillard down at 9,200, 80-some hundred, Stephen Curry was under 10K. We're no longer at that point in the season. So you kind of have to, pick and choose what you want. I think that Lamello Ball, Ja Morant, and DeJounte Murray all stick out right around 10,000. If I had to rank them in order, that would probably be the order as well. I do worry about Lamello being on the road, since he's struggled more on the road than at home this season, but that has more to do with limited games and him getting, essentially there's a matchup against Miami that he really struggled in, a matchup against Orlando where he only played 24 minutes. In his last 4, he scored 38 plus in all of them. Obviously, that's not getting it done for 10,000, but he's coming off a 69 fantasy point performance against the Lakers, and it just more or less shows that he's performing better on the road as of recent than he was early in the season. I like both him and Morant because I don't necessarily think that either one is going to be focusing defensively in this game. Neither of them are, overly dominant defenders regardless. And I'm not really that worried. I guess if Dylan Brooks plays, they could move him onto Ball, and we could see what happens there with Ja Morant lining up against Terry Rozier for the majority of the game. If that's the case, I probably bump Ball down a little bit. I do think that DeJounte Murray is a great option. He was on fire prior to his last game, in which he actually nearly triple-doubled. It's just he wasn't scoring overly well. He shot 5 of 19. He gets a great matchup against the Kings. As you move down a little bit, the one guy that just seems a bit underpriced is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's 9,000 almost, but he just gets a really good matchup against New Orleans, who doesn't really have the rim protection. And obviously, Gilgeous-Alexander is near the top of the NBA in drives per game. So I do think that is a very good play. As you move down more, it's kind of tough of what you want to do. I think that at 6,300, obviously coming off of, I guess it wasn't even a less than stellar game. He did score 16. He just wasn't putting up the points that he was before. But Jordan Poole at 6,300, still too cheap in a game that should be relatively high scoring against Minnesota. He scored 30 plus in 4 consecutive, he's flashing near 50 fantasy point upside, and it's just very clear that he has a massive role in the Golden State offense. Right below him, I guess at the same price actually, is Terry Rozier, who played 40 minutes in his last game. He's now taken 22 shot attempts in each of his last 2. As I mentioned, I guess it probably doesn't really matter for him because I would expect that Dillon Brooks would probably guard Lamello over Rozier. So if Brooks is in, that actually kind of makes Rozier a relatively sneaky option because he'll get the matchup against Ja Morant. But just kind of interesting at this point because we're not really sure what's going to happen. Another guy that's just way too cheap and his price hasn't corrected yet based on the injury report with Colin Sexton obviously being out for quite some time. Ricky Rubio played 31 minutes in Madison Square Garden the other night and dropped 61 fantasy points. I wouldn't necessarily expect Rubio to shoot 8 of 9 from 3 again. He just, 1, doesn't take that many threes, 2, he's not that good of a shooter. But he has double-double upside with a ton of assist potential, and if they're letting him shoot plenty, he took 19 shot attempts in that game against Washington. It's just a great spot. At 5,200, it's way too cheap, and it just seems like he's probably going to end up more or less being a chalk option at this point. And then, you have some of the Denver guys for cheaper. They kind of stick out more than anyone else. It just kind of depends on who they're going to go with, who's going to play, and where their minutes are going to go. Moving to shooting guard, I don't necessarily love anyone at the top. I'm fine with like Devin Booker in a matchup against Portland. The guy at the top that sticks out the most to me would probably be CJ McCollum. 8,500. He shoots a ton of threes, and Phoenix has arguably the worst three-point defense in the entire NBA. That just feels like a relatively solid spot. Zach LaVine also underpriced. 7,600, yet he scored 40 plus in each of his last 5. He comes with even more upside. I don't necessarily love the matchup against Dallas, but I'm not going to shy away from it either. So I do think that Zach LaVine is a guy that not necessarily is a great option specifically for this slate. He's just a player that's underpriced. He's too cheap, and it's going to be relatively easy, honestly, to fit him into your lineups tonight. As you drop down more, you have some of the guys that we talked about at point guard. Josh Giddey is an interesting option. He's not overly consistent, which you wouldn't really expect a rookie to be. But when he gets the minutes, he's been playing well, and I would assume that he gets the minutes against New Orleans tonight. Similar to Lamello Ball, the big concern here is that he's on the road, and he's had a few bad road games. Some of those have more or less to do with, it was like early in the season. He only played 20 minutes on the road against Houston. He scored a little less than a fantasy point per minute, so it kind of drags his numbers down a bit, but there is still concern that obviously he's a rookie. With that said, 6,500 is not too expensive for him in tournaments, and he does come with triple-double upside, especially against a team like the New Orleans Pelicans. So I do think that he's a very viable option. Will Barton, I think very clear. You're probably playing him in cash at this point, 6,300. He's been playing well, and now he's probably more or less the leader of the offense. So I don't think we need to go too in-depth on that play there. Dennis Schroeder makes quite a bit of sense at 6,100. It's just a little too cheap with Jaylen Brown out. He's played 30 and 39 minutes in his last 2. He took 22 shot attempts in his last game. Similar to Rozier, it's just too cheap for a guy that's going to shoot the ball that much. So I do feel like he's in a relatively good spot, and I'm willing to take him on this slate. As you continue down, you have players like Grayson Allen, who pains me to even, consider playing him, but he's playing well. He's seeing plenty of minutes. He's only 5,100, and as long as he just keeps getting open three-point shots, which I think the last I checked was a few games ago, but I believe he was leading the NBA in wide open threes. That's no one within 6 feet of you when you take the shot. And I mean, that's more or less just because Giannis is dragging everyone away from him. So if he keeps getting those and he has the ability, obviously, to knock them down, I do think that at 5,100, he's in play. The big one here, I think you can use... See, I keep going back and forth on this because I don't necessarily know what the Cavs are going to do. If Isaac Okoro's out, I think that Cedi Osman is in play because they're going to need him to play the minutes. If Isaac Okoro comes back, I could see them giving heavy minutes to Ricky Rubio, heavy minutes to Darius Garland, and then kind of letting Cedi Osman get lost in the fold. But if he's going to get 30-plus minutes, we know that he loves just shooting threes. That's kind of where we get a lot of value on DraftKings. Against Toronto, he took 10 in 26 minutes. He's had a few games, 21 minutes, he's taken 5, 17 minutes, he took 7. When he played 30 minutes earlier in the season, he took 12. So if his shot's falling, he's going to shoot a lot. And he does come with quite a bit of upside for under 4K. And then obviously it goes without saying, but you have the Denver guys in this situation as well. Another guy, Cameron Payne. He played 22 minutes in his last game. I would assume he probably sticks around that, maybe a little less than this, but 35.5 fantasy points. I wouldn't play him in cash games, but I do think that he comes with more than enough upside to be considered in tournaments. At the top of small forward, if you can get to Kevin Durant, completely feel free. Love that play. He's coming off a near 60 fantasy point performance against Chicago, and Orlando is really bad against small forwards. So Kevin Durant, very good play at 10-9. I think he's probably the top option at small forward tonight. Brandon Ingram, I think, will be viable if he's playing, but he obviously needs to be locked into the big minutes, so you're going to have to wait on injury news for that. Outside of that, you probably drop down a little bit more. I don't necessarily want to pay $6,900 for Scotty Barnes, but when the upside's there. We know the minutes are there. The minutes are going to be big. He played 38 and 31 since returning from the thumb injury. Scored 37 fantasy points, 32 in the other game, which, you know, he comes with more upside than that as well. And the matchup against Boston isn't as bad as it's been in years past. Their defense just isn't there this season, so I don't really have too many issues with it. The big thing for Barnes is in his last game, he took 7 shot attempts. I believe that was his lowest total field goal attempts on the entire season. Still scored 32 fantasy points, so imagine if he's taking his usual 15 to 19. Just plenty of upside in that type of a situation. As you move down a little bit, you have guys like Kyle Kuzma. I have no problems going there. Gordon Hayward even. I'm completely fine with someone like that. Sadiq Bey, I feel like he hasn't really flashed all that much. I know he looked good the one game. I believe Jeremy Grant was out against Chicago, but he hasn't really looked dominant outside of that. So I do think a matchup against Houston, who obviously is one of the worst teams in the league, arguably the worst, I do think that that could potentially right the ship. I also like Buddy Hield at the spot. Again, similar to Cedi Osman, except for Hield doesn't solely rely on scoring the way that Osman can at sometimes. He does just throw up a ridiculous amount of threes. I believe he's averaging over 10 a game at this point. So Buddy Hield comes in and he just throws up the three like no tomorrow. He's also playing relatively well, and 6,300 doesn't really show his pure upside if his shot's falling. So I do think that that's completely reasonable to play him. As you move down, if Dylan Brooks is out, Desmond Bane once again is a bit too cheap at only 5,000. So I'll keep him on my radar, but solely relies on whether Dylan Brooks plays or not. And then, once again, we have players down at the bottom like Cedi Osman, the guys for Denver. You even have some guys for San Antonio that can light up the scoreboard pretty quick. If any of them catch fire, they play bigger minutes. It's Doug McDermott and Lonnie Walker. They're both under 4K. a lot of risk involved in those types of plays. But, you know, they do have quite a bit of reward as well if they're performing well. Moving to power forward, it's tough. I don't think you necessarily can go wrong at the top of this. Giannis is 100% fine. I already talked about Kevin Durant. Anthony Davis scored 68.5 fantasy points in his last game. He played 44 minutes against the Charlotte Hornets, and I believe at one point in time he left the court to go throw up and then came back. He gets a terrible matchup against Miami. At the same time, though, with LeBron out, Davis just comes with absurd upside, and with him getting the matchup against Miami, when you look on DraftKings, it says opponent rank first. It's saying that Miami has the best defense in the league against that position. Realistically, people aren't going to play Anthony Davis tonight. I said the last time that if people weren't going to play him, he's an elite GPP option. It turns out he then turned relatively chalky, as he should have been. I don't think that'll be the case tonight. The slate's too big. The matchup is too difficult. Anthony Davis can still be used in tournaments, and he is a great tournament option. As you move down, Jason Tatum, fine with. Julius Randle, fine with. Domantas Sabonis, I'm completely fine with. Denver doesn't really have the defense at this point to stop him. So I have no issues with any of them. I think that the player more or less that sticks out in this range, though, would be DeMar DeRozan. He's been playing extremely well as a small ball 4 for Chicago. He kind of runs a weird rotation where he plays a few minutes, he then takes a seat, and then once Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball come out of the game, I believe Vucevic generally as well, they bring DeRozan back in to finish out the first quarter, and he really takes over in situations like that. They do it in the first and second half. So he ends the last few minutes of the first quarter, starts the first few minutes of the second quarter, then he takes a break and finishes the half. He does that same thing in the second half. And when he's essentially the only real starter on the floor, you know, he kind of takes over, and he's been living at the line in recent games. Gets a plus matchup against Dallas. I don't see them really stopping him, so I do think that DeMar DeRozan once again makes a really good option. As you move down, there's guys like Evan Mobley. I believe that he's in a great spot against the Washington Wizards. They really do struggle against bigs, and you know, Mobley's flashed plenty of upside. Right under him, Wendell Carter Jr. He's coming off of a monstrous performance against the Utah Jazz. Again, I think he's in a fine spot against Brooklyn. We have a few other guys that I've already talked about. Jaren Jackson Jr., as long as he's playing the big minutes, which it seems like if he can at least relatively control his fouls, he should be. Fouling is still an issue for him. He's still relatively young in the NBA. But 6,100 is a completely fine play as long as he's getting 30-plus minutes, which you won't necessarily know, you know, until the game. There's not much you can do about it. But at the same time, it's a good option. The chalk option, I'm assuming at this point, will probably be Bobby Portis at 5,500. That's assuming Brook Lopez is out. Bobby Portis has been starting. He is a very good fantasy player on a per-minute basis. So if he's getting, you know, 30-plus minutes, very clearly he's going to beat 5,500 as a price tag. So he makes a great option. Again, assuming Brook Lopez is out. Then you have Aaron Gordon. We don't really need to go into him if their names are slipping. Herb Jones and Brandon Ingram are out. You have Josh Hart in that range as well. So a ton of plays. We already know Ayton's been ruled out. Frank Kaminsky, I know he looked bad in his last game, but he scored 32 and 35 in the other two games without Ayton. So once again at 5K, he's going to be in play. And then as you drop down a little bit more, Robert Covington's been playing well. I don't have his numbers for last night's game. Obviously, I'm recording this while the game's happening. But Robert Covington at 4,300, it does make an interesting option. Moving to center, I think we probably skip, you know, most of the top options. We've kind of already talked about most of them, and I don't necessarily love Karl Anthony Towns. I don't really... I guess a revenge game for Christian Wood is in the cards. He does have the upside to beat the $9,200 price tag, but that's not necessarily where I'm looking to go. I prefer someone like Jonas Valanciunas, especially if Ingram is ruled out again. I really like the matchup against OKC. I don't think they have anyone that's going to be able to stop him. Slightly under that, you have Nikola Vucevic, who locked into solid minutes. He gets a great matchup against Dallas. Again, just no one there that's going to be able to stop him. Jared Allen at 7,500. He's been performing extremely well. Comes with near 2020 upside. I believe he's topped out at 17 rebounds in multiple games. He has 15 plus rebounds in 4 straight, and obviously he's been locked and loaded with Lauri Markkanen and Kevin Love out with big minutes, and now he gets a really good matchup against Washington where he is athletic enough to kind of play in this type of a game. So I think that Jared Allen at 7,500 is one of the better plays on this entire slate. As you keep going, there's players that I'll just always take my shots on. Mo Bamba always comes with upside for that price tag. I have no problems with that. If you want to play someone like Thad Young, he's flashed the ability to beat his price tag as well. Steven Adams is still a bit too cheap. The problem is you can't even slightly trust his minutes. They've been around 20 the last couple of games. It's just not really something that I want to attack on this slate. Drew Eubanks gets the great matchup against Sacramento. He's played 22 minutes in 2 straight. His score has looked quite different in those two. One of them was 37 fantasy points. One was 19. It's tough to know exactly what's going to happen in that type of a situation. But the matchup is there against Sacramento, so I do think that he's at least viable more or less in tournaments in that style of game. I think that about does it. We went over a ton of players. That's a lot of information to take in. Once again, comment below. We're looking for the point total of Lamello Ball and the point total of Ja Morant. If you get both of them 100% correct on the dot, again, that is each one. Lamello Ball point, Ja Morant point, not combined. I will see if I could potentially get you a week free of our NBA DFS. Again, got to talk to the higher ups, but it's pretty hopeful that we can get that done because that's a really good feat, or I guess a major feat that you hit, guessing both of them correctly. If you have any other players that you want to know anything about, just comment below. DFSkarma.com is where you can find all of our free stuff. But until then, I believe the next 2 podcasts will be done by Ben, and they should be out for the Thursday and Friday slates. Hopefully on this 13-game slate, everyone finds a ton of success, makes a bit of money, and good luck tonight.